Okay, I apologise beforehand. I've got a tickly cough at the moment. So today is the day we transition from the aspen tree to the yew tree. And yew is the final tree in the Ogham system. It's the conclusion tree. If you see the Ogham as a wheel, which is how we're working with it in the Ogham Grove, yew tree is 12 o'clock. It's the midnight hour. So it's also on a digital clock 0000 .00. You know, it's that moment in between one cycle and another cycle. And that's what it holds. It holds winter solstice and the rebirth of the sun, beginning of a new year, and so on. Now, before I read what I want to read, we'll just quickly look at the Irish Briatha Ogham, which are the word kennings from 1390 AD in the Book of Ballymote. There's 3 of them. For the yew tree, then it says one of them is oldest tree. Certainly yew trees they live for thousands of years. They can do, you know. I don't think anything lives older than a yew tree, and it can rebirth itself. It can put branches into the ground and grow again, sort of thing. Aspen kind of does something similar. Whole aspen forest is one living entity, but yew trees live as a single tree, as a single trunk for thousands of years. The other one, word kenning, is the most withered tree. Again, it's kind of saying the most old, most withered. And the third one translates as energy of an infirm person. I guess that might mean an elderly person with a Zimmer frame. I don't know. Energy of an infirm person. But all 3 word kennings are suggesting great age and the oldest tree. And then the Auraset Nanises just glosses it as the yew tree. Now, so much for the word kennings, just that it's the oldest, most ancient of trees. Yeah, birch and pine are the pioneer trees. They're the first trees to arrive after the Ice Age, but they don't live as long as a yew tree. So I think the great age of the yew is that it's an acknowledgement it can live for thousands of years, whereas birch trees and pine trees don't live thousands of years. So I'm going to read a page in a bit, which I don't normally do. I normally just waffle. When I first started working with the Ogham Grove, the first pattern, the first pattern that jumped out at me and excited me was oak and holly being on either side of Beltane. And that was enough to kind of inspire my juices and make me keep investigating more and learning more. But that's not the greatest pattern in the Ogham Grove. And I'm going to blow the Ogham Grove's trumpet a little bit here, because this is just pure, not accident, but it's not contrivance. It just is what it is. If you put the 20 trees in a circle, this is what it is. You know, it's not me contriving a single thing. But yew tree and apple tree are directly opposite each other, and they are winter solstice and summer solstice. And that is the greatest pattern in the Ogham Grove, because the yew tree, winter solstice, is the head of a pentagram of trees, of evergreen trees. An apple at summer solstice is the head of a pentagram of trees, the rose family, blackthorn, hawthorn, so on. And they're interlaced, they're interconnected, these 2 pentagrams. And that pattern is astounding. Now, more astounding too is there is old Irish bardic lore, which I'm going to read to you, about the yew tree and the apple tree. You know, now this is really important, and I say the Ogham Grove blowing its trumpet, because when I first started promoting the Ogham Grove, it rattled a few cages. People for decades, since the 1950s, have been using a 13-tree year system, often described as the Druidic moon months or moon calendar, whatever, what have you. But it's an Ogham system of 13 trees, because the chap who invented it, Robert Graves, only wanted 13 trees. He had this lovely idea of there being 13 moon cycles in a year, and he was predominantly interested in the moon goddess, the white goddess, as he called her. Ironically, going to end up talking about the moon goddess further on. But because he only wanted 13 trees, he threw 7 away. You know, and that's the crunch of the matter. The Ogham always was a system of 20. You know, that's the Ogham alphabet, it's those 20 symbols, 4 groups of 5. It never was 13. So how do you choose which 7 to remove? You know, and I'm not going to worry about that, but the crying shame, if you like, is that the 13-tree system does not have yew and apple. And yet I think they're the most important, certainly in the Ogham Grove, with the winter solstice and the summer solstice. Now, you could just argue, well, you know, the 20 is a solar system, it's the solstices and equinoxes, and the 13 is a moon system, and that's fine, you can work with it that way, but there is no yew tree or apple tree in the 13. Now, this story is from a lovely old book. It's going to flicker away. It's Celtic Myth and Legend by Charles Squire, published in 1910, quite a while ago. I've had this book since 1995, and it's well battered with my grubby hands. Now, just have a swig of water. So this story, it's a page and a half, and it's about a prince and a princess of Ireland. And they're a bit like Romeo and Juliet, and Charles Squire makes that reference in the book. And it's important because they're 2 young lovers that die tragically by ghostly intervention. They're tricked into dying. It's a strange story. And then from their graves grow the yew tree and the apple tree. And the intrigue with all of this is that the wood from this yew and apple tree entwined was what the Irish bards from the 2nd century wrote down all of the lore of Ulster and Leinster and the love marriages and stuff. So this is old bardic lore from Ireland about the yew tree and the apple tree and how they interact with each other like yin and yang. So where's my page? I lost my page as I was babbling on it. Okay. I don't speak Irish, Gaelic like my dad, so I might pronounce some of these words wrong. I'll do my best. The scene of this story takes its name from another and hardly less beautiful love tale. The story is the yew tree at the head of Bolla's Strand. Bolla is the young prince. The yew tree had grown out of the grave of Bolla of the honeyed speech, that is, his words were as sweet as honey, like Ogma, and it bore the appearance of Bolla's love, Ailinn. This Gaelic Romeo and Juliet were of royal birth. Bolla was an heir to Ulster, and Ailinn was daughter of the King of Leinster's son. Not by any feud of the Montague and Capulet were they parted, however, but by the craft of a ghostly enemy. They had arranged to meet one another at Dundeel Gan, and Baille, who arrived there first, was greeted by a stranger. "What news do you bring?" asked Baille. "None," replied the stranger, "except that Ailinn of Leinster was setting out to meet her lover, but the men of Leinster kept her back, and her heart broke there and then from grief." When Baille heard this, his own heart broke, and he fell dead on the strand, while the messenger went on the wings of the wind to the home of Ailinn, who had not yet started on her journey. "Whence come you?" she asked him. "From Ulster, by the shore of Dundeel Gan, where I saw men raising a stone over one who had just died. And on the stone I read the name Baille. He had come to meet some woman he was in love with, but it was destined that they should never see one another again in this life." At this news, Ailinn too fell dead and was buried, and we are told that an apple tree grew out of her grave, the apples of which bore the likeness of the face of Baille, while a yew tree sprung from Baille's grave and took the appearance of Ailinn. This legend, which is probably part of the common heritage of Europeans, is found in the folklore over an area which stretches from Ireland to India. The Gaelic version has, however, an ending unknown to the others. The two trees, it relates, were cut down and made into wands, upon which the poets of Ulster and Leinster cut the songs of the love tragedies of the two provinces in Ogham. But even these mute memorials of Baille and Ailinn were destined not to be divided. After 200 years, so about 300 AD, after 200 years, Art, the lonely High King of Ireland, ordered them to be brought to the hall of Tara. And as soon as the wands found themselves under the same roof, they all sprang together, and no force or skill could part them again. So the king commanded them to be kept like any other jewel in the treasury of Tara. So that's an old Irish bardic story talking about 1st century AD and then the 3rd century AD, when they sprung back together again, the Yew and the Apple wood. And yeah, that's what Yew and Apple do in the Ogham Grove. They this tightly interlaced evergreen pentagram and rose family pentagram. Now, I've got diagrams of that further on, but it's a fascinating thing, you know, that you know, it's yin and yang, it's male and female, it's love, it's winter solstice, summer solstice trees entwined forever, and they cannot be separated. The star law of the yew tree goes from 21 degrees Sagittarius to 9 degrees Capricorn, the middle of which is winter solstice. Talk about winter solstice and Saturnalia more on the Ogham Grove over the days to come, and I've got some diagrams further on. The constellation law is quite interesting, because corresponding with the days of yew is Sagittarius the Archer, but also a small constellation that often gets overlooked, and it's Sagitta. It's the arrow. So Sagittarius is the Archer, and there's also the constellation of the arrow that the Archer has shot. The arrow is flying through space, you know, it's just called Sagitta. Now, there's the winter hexagon and there's the summer triangle, and the summer triangle is 3 birds: Aquila the eagle, Cygnus the swan, and Lyra the harp is also a small bird. Now, in the myths of Hercules, Hercules shoots his arrow at the Stymphalian birds. These are monstrous birds that belong to the moon goddess Artemis, you know, and so in the night sky, the star law is this arrow being shot at these monstrous birds. Now, as the winter hexagon is in the night sky, the three birds are below the horizon. It's underworld star law stories. But it's interesting because along with the days of Yew, there is a whole load of archery lore. You know, the famous Welsh longbow, or the English longbow at Agincourt, you know, they're yew bows. You know, the yew wood is unique with its heartwood and outer wood, allows you to make a very springy, strong and powerful flexing bow. Furthermore, the yew tree, everything about it, apart from the red flesh of its berries, and you mustn't eat the seeds. The seeds are poisonous, but you can eat the red flesh of its berries. Is poisonous, is toxic, and ancient people used the toxic elements of the yew tree for putting poison on the tips of their arrows. So not only does it make wonderful bows, the yew tree, but it also allows you to poison the tips as well, you know. And this time of year of remembering ancestors and stuff, you know, it's described by Caesar that a lot of the Gauls, the Celts, committed suicide when they were defeated. They committed suicide rather than be tortured by the Romans. You know, it's quite a horrible thing. And the poison they used to end their own lives was yew, you know. So their sacred tree of the winter solstice, I would argue that the tree of Nemetona, tree of rebirth, they're using that tree as a gateway drug out of this world into the next world, you know. And they believed in reincarnation, but you know, it's not nice to think about, but maybe that was more favorable than being tortured by Romans. You know, you just drink this potion and bye-bye, you know. It's better than the monstrous things that could happen to you. So it's got its dark history, the yew tree, or it's a merciful death rather than a horrible death. Things. Right, I'm going to go on to the PowerPoint and explain some of those things. And also look at the idea that the yew tree is sacred to the Celtic goddess Nemetona, she of the sacred grove. Okay, so this is the first picture in the PowerPoint. This is simply the sun cross. The sun cross is the winter solstice, summer solstice, spring equinox and autumn equinox, and how it's played out in the Ogham Grove. Again, so this isn't any contrivance by me or even 21st century neo-paganism. This is the medieval tree list just placed around a circle, and these are the patterns that it makes, you know. All I've done is, rather than looking at the alphabet in a straight line, I've made it a wheel, you know. And so winter solstice corresponds with the yew, summer solstice with the apple, ash tree for spring equinox, elder tree for autumn equinox. First basic pattern. And it fits quite well, you know. So the aspen tree, today we transition from aspen into yew. And aspen lore is about death and funeral rites, and even golden aspen leaves on headdresses in ancient Mesopotamia in royal burials and stuff. That the aspen was the psychopomp tree, leading us into yew, you know, the finale and the stillness and peace before rebirth, you know. And then a brand new Ogham cycle will begin again with the birch tree, which is all about new beginnings. So it's the beauty, if you like, of the Ogham Grove wheel. Not me, just the 20 trees from the medieval tree list. Now, here's one of the amazing things. There are only 4 evergreen trees in the Ogham, which 4 of them hold the positions of the pentagram. The odd one out is willow, you know, but there are only 4 evergreens, there aren't 5. So, but holly, ivy, pine and yew are holding the positions of the pentagram. So that's the, what I call the evergreen pentagram, you know. And interconnected with that, like the story of Baille and Ailinn, in this diagram, the golden pentagram is the rose family pentagram, and the dark green one is the evergreen one. So you can see how the wands flew together and could not be separated in the old Irish story. It's played out in the Ogham. What's the chances of that? It's not my contrivance, you know, that's just the tree list in a circle is doing that. Hidden pentagrams. This is a cross section of a yew stem. Isn't that amazing? That the yew stem itself holds the pentagram within it. And in between each of the big 5 points, if you like, there's little blips. So there's a smaller pentagram inside that as well. It's like, you know, you cut an apple in half and there's a 5-pointed star. So not only are yew and apple interlaced like this, but their vegetation carries the pentagram in its stems and in its fruit as well. Amazing. You can't make stuff like this up. So here's a thing then. So I'm in classical law, the yew groves, yew trees and yew groves were sacred to the goddess Hecate or Hecate, you know. And for the Romans, they called her Diana Triformis or Diana Trivia. Trivia is spelled like trivia, but trivia means 3 ways. The 3 ways, trivia, Diana Trivia, and also Diana Triformis, which means 3-formed Diana. So who would Hecate be in the Celtic world, or who would Triple Diana be in the Celtic world? You know, well, the most obvious contender is a goddess called Nemetona, and that's kind of saying nothing really, because the name Nemetona is frustrating. It just means she of the sacred grove, you know. So all it's telling you really is that the sacred groves had a divine feminine watching over them, you know, she of the sacred grove, Nemetona. And that can be traced back to Diana again, because the main Nemetona, Nemi, was the grove of Nemi of Diana in Italy, you know. But here's the thing, this is a map of Somerset, and this map was created in the early 1600s, around about 1620. Now, if you look at the top area in the middle, there's a green figure with a city on her head, and that's Bath, Aquasulis. Now, there is a Romano-British inscription in Roman Bath to Nemetona. So Nemetona, we can prove with archaeology, was in this area, you know. Now, if you look at the figure of Bath and then go down the map, lower down, there's a female figure with a bow and arrow. You know, she's an Artemis type figure. Now, really, these maps show all of the rivers of the counties in Britain as river nymphs, as naked ladies. But here and there, there's special landscape features. And this lady at the bottom with the bow and arrow, she's the figurehead for the great forest called Coit Moor in Brythonic, and the Romans called it Silva Magna, meaning the Great Forest. The Saxons just called it Selwood Forest. But the Great Forest is a very important area, especially for Glastonbury, which is where some of my knowledge comes from. The main place in the Great Forest these days is a place called Stourhead, which has now belongs to the National Trust. Now, looking at this map of 1620, and this is before the witchcraft trials of Somerset, that iconography continued even in Stourhead today from the 1700s. That's a close-up of her. Diana is honoured at Stourhead still, that this Artemis, Diana, Nemetona, goddess of the forests. Now, Margaret Murray, who explored witchcraft in the 20th century, upon whose work Wicca is created, described her understanding of witchcraft of the 1600s as Dianic. You know, that Diana was the goddess of the witches, if you like, you know, but Margaret Murray didn't have modern archaeological knowledge at her fingertips. She didn't know about the Celtic Diana, so she didn't think in terms of Nemetona, what have you. She's just thinking in classical terms, so she referred to it as Dianic. But the witches of Somerset, of that very area that I've shown you, of which the yew trees are really important. You know, in Glastonbury there's Chalicewell, and there's yew trees there that have been dated back to Roman times, and the archaeologist Philip Ratz acknowledges that yew groves were sacred to Hecate in his archaeological review. Also up on the Mendips, there's a Roman temple called Pagan's Hill, and Pagan's Hill has a yew grove. And even in the very middle of the Glastonbury zodiac, there's a place called Park Wood, which has a yew grove in its centre. So the yew grove, Hecate, Diana, and the witches of Somerset, very interesting, all of a kind of sleeping memory in the landscape, I suppose. Now, here's an intriguing thing then, is that the witches of Somerset called their god Robin. That's why I've put a robin on my yew stake here, you know. And it seems that, you know, it's a bit like King Arthur. King Arthur legends are all over the British Isles, and Robin Hood legends are all over the British Isles as well. You know, you can pin it down to, you know, Sherwood Forest and the Sheriff of Nottingham and King John and all that sort of stuff. But there's a whole load of Robin lore all over the place that's more enveloped, I guess, by the phrase or the name Robin Goodfellow, you know. And this Robin Goodfellow is otherworldly, fairy, protector of the woods, protector of the forests, consort, if you like, to the forest goddess, you know. But you're getting into obscure fairy lore there, but the legends of Robin Hood seem to be based on that as well, you know. So why did the Somerset witches call their god Robin? Something to investigate, especially as Robin is the archer. You know, he used a yew bow, and famously, apparently, Robin and Marion got married under a yew tree. You know, so the archer thing again, back to Sagittarius, you know. Is there a depiction of Nemetona? Well, not officially. There's this figurine. I would say it's Nemetona. She's from Northern Gaul, 3rd century AD. Reasons I'd say Nemetona is because A, she's got antlers, which is the Celtic animal of the winter time, so she's a winter figure. And more importantly, in her on the right hand side, her left arm, she's holding a cornucopia. Now, Capricorn, winter solstice, Capricorn means goat's horn, and the goat's horn became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty and stuff, you know. So the cornucopia and the antlers both sing of winter solstice, you know. So I'd say this is a Celtic winter solstice figure. And temples of Diana always had deer's antlers, and she's wearing that. And the same area of Somerset that I pointed at, the Roman temples there have found deer's antlers buried around them and stuff. So it has this kind of stag antler, winter goddess, yew trees motifs and stuff. So this is my picture from my dad's book, but it's for the yew tree. But it represents Nemetona, or it represents she of the sacred grove. And I've done her as a triple goddess like Diana Triformis. Triple goddesses are very Celtic, of course. And if you look carefully at her cheekbones, there's different foliage on her cheekbones for different times of the year. You know, so at the top, she's got holly for the winter time. On the right-hand side, she's got mayflowers for Beltane. And on the left-hand side, there's broom flowers for the summer queen. So it's the one goddess going through the year, if you like. And the yew berry wheel is all around her. That yew is that entirety or conclusion of the whole circle, if you like. You know, the exciting thing of there not being any representations of Nemetona means that modern artists can start banging them out, start creating them. Let's start making icons of Nemetona, you know, she of the sacred grove. So, do I stop that? Stop share. That's my presentation. Then we'll chat about that for a little while, and then we'll do our final meditation, which is all 20 trees. And okay, so I'll stop recording and you can put your microphones back on.